fighter. Lightning inspired. Fight.
En este episodio escucharán un formato distinto, pues esta charla fue grabada originalmente en inglés con Mona Bani. Ella es mi primera invitada internacional, cofundadora de Televice, un canal digital que pone en el radar a proyectos a favor de la comunidad. La verdad es que hay mucho que aprender del trabajo y de la vida de Mona, quien creció siendo refugiada de la revolución iraní. Toda su vida ha girado en torno al activismo, la política y el trabajo comunitario. Espero que disfruten mucho este episodio.
¿Escuchas? Tiene onda. Un podcast de Ibero 2.cloud, canal digital de la estación de radio Ibero 90.9.
Bienvenidos sean todos a un episodio más de Neogurús. Yo soy Almond Hernández y en este episodio me acompaña Mona Bani, quien es activista cuyos padres lucharon en la revolución iraní. Posteriormente se convirtieron junto con toda su familia en refugiados políticos en Dinamarca. Por lo tanto, Mona desde muy joven tuvo un acercamiento en primera línea con la política, con el activismo, y desde entonces se ha dedicado a trabajar para combatir la injusticia social, siendo la codirectora de la organización My Project Gardens y además siendo consultora del tercer sector con el proyecto que ella cofundó Televice TV. El trabajo de Mona está enfocado a trabajar sobre todo con la población joven más vulnerable, como los refugiados, entre muchas otras cosas. Es el primer episodio internacional que tenemos actualmente. Mona vive en Reino Unido. Mona, thank you for being here. It's a real honor because this is our first international podcast episode. Yes.
Oh, that's really exciting. I didn't know that it was your first international one. I feel honored now in that case.
Mona Bani es una mujer cuya biografía podría ser un bestseller. Sus padres se dedicaron al activismo y fueron figuras políticas muy prominentes. Ella creció como exiliada en Dinamarca.
Yeah, so my parents were political refugees from Iran after the Iranian Revolution. They were very active and quite sort of prominent political figures in the socialist movements that were, building at that time. My dad in particular was quite a known writer, activist, etc., who was quite a big part of building some of the worker communist and socialist kind of resistance that took place against the Islamic regime of Iran that came into power.
Mis padres fueron refugiados políticos de Irán y después de la revolución iraní fueron muy activos. Fueron figuras políticas prominentes en los movimientos sociales que se formaron en esa época. Mi papá en particular era un renombrado escritor y activista que fue parte importante en construir la resistencia obrera, socialista y comunista, que luchó en contra del régimen del Islam que llegó al poder. Los padres de Mona vivieron en Kazajstán antes de llegar a Dinamarca, junto con otros refugiados iraníes cuyos hijos aún tienen amistad con Mona.
My childhood was spent both under a lot of security protection for their identities and also against an environment which was very unconventional. My parents didn't have these, I guess, very traditional jobs or, embedded in Danish society in a very traditional way. And they were continuing their political work from Europe. So there was always a lot of political organizing in my life around me in my house. And I don't think I ever really realized until much more recently how much that shaped my idea of what even just daily life is. I think political work was so normalized that if anything, I felt weird in environments where people didn't know about these things and maybe weren't caring or weren't fighting for them.
Mi niñez la pasé con mucha seguridad y protección, y también en un ambiente fuera de lo común. Mis padres no tenían estos trabajos tradicionales, no embonaban en la sociedad de una manera tradicional. Continuaron su trabajo político desde Europa. Siempre hubo mucha organización política alrededor de mí y de mi casa, y creo que nunca me di cuenta de cuánto esto formó mi idea de lo que era una vida cotidiana. Creo que el trabajo político estaba tan normalizado que para mí era raro que alguien no supiera de estos temas o no estuviera luchando o preocupándose por ello. Mona fue a la escuela en Copenhague y tuvo una educación muy democrática y holística. Me contó que subestimó el impacto que tuvo en ella hasta que llegó al Reino Unido y se encontró con el sistema tradicional educativo inglés.
It was an amazing school, and I think I underestimated really how much impact that had on me in terms of maybe how I think and how I approach like social environments. Because when I moved to the UK as a teenager, I found the much more traditional and quite rigid and strict school system here in the UK really difficult. Like I found it so stifling and really like it doesn't encourage joy for learning.
Era una escuela increíble. Y de nuevo creo que subestimé cuánto impacto tuvo realmente en mí, en términos quizá de cómo pienso y me aproximo a la sociedad. Porque cuando me mudé al Reino Unido, como adolescente, me encontré con un sistema mucho más rígido, estricto y tradicional, que se me hacía tan difícil que no promovía el gusto por estudiar. Mona ha dedicado parte de su trabajo a los proyectos grassroots, concepto que quizá no es tan conocido, pero que sin duda está muy presente en nuestra sociedad mexicana. Acá le pregunté qué son los proyectos grassroots exactamente.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I'm sure in Mexico, even if the concept isn't consciously kind of discussed or acknowledged, I'm sure all the work is still happening. It might not have a joined up name for it or something, because I'm sure it's happening in most societies. But yeah, we Untelevised, which is the media channel that I'm part of running now, we really built ourselves on this idea of wanting to highlight grassroots and grassroots work and people that work in that way, because we felt that it was quite misunderstood or unseen. Really, for me, it is something about groups or organizations that are quite separate from, if you want to say, establishment. I mean, these are all quite, vague words, but I guess something that's incredibly uninstitutionalized, so it doesn't have, it's very much led by the people that are involved in doing it.
Estoy de acuerdo. Seguro en México, aunque el concepto no es tan discutido, conscientemente estoy segura que todo el trabajo sigue ocurriendo. Quizá no tiene un nombre relacionado o algo, porque estoy segura que está ocurriendo en la mayoría de las sociedades. Pero sí, Untelevised, el canal digital que estamos operando actualmente, lo construimos con este ideal de destacar el trabajo grassroots y a las personas que trabajan así, porque sentíamos que era mal entendido o no estaba visibilizado. Para mí, se trata de grupos y organizaciones separadas de lo establecido, algo que está increíblemente no institucionalizado. Entonces está guiado por las personas que están involucrándose en hacerla. Se trata más de personas uniéndose y dedicándose a hacer algo y haciéndolo. ¿Qué es Untelevised, el canal digital que Mona cofundó?
Yeah, so myself and my my co-founder, God, it sounds very grand when you say co-founder, but yeah, I guess we did found it. And me and her both in our own way had a personal journey where we'd come from more formal environments and gone more and more into the informal. So in my case, within social sector, I had worked for government, I had worked for very large charities, more what you might consider NGOs with funding. And offices and all of that. I had worked there. I had worked for sort of research institutions and those kinds of organizations. And then Fizeo had worked, in more mainstream media, had done jobs for BBC, for Channel 4, etc. Both of us in our own way had reached a point in our lives where we had felt like those institutions were not for us, that maybe they were too big, that they were too disconnected, and that we wanted to get closer to, the front line, I guess, of the work that we were doing. So that was her reasons, and those were my reasons. And we met because she actually had been commissioned to make a film about all of the sort of social organizations of that particular borough of London. A borough is like a region, a municipality, a region of London. And so she came to interview my organization as well. She interviewed the founder of May Project Gardens, Ian. And then slowly she became the person that we would use for our videos when we wanted to promote our project. And then I started speaking to her a lot about this feeling of grassroots projects not being documented enough. At the time, I was doing a radio show. And so I was already doing media, but specifically radio. But she had all the more visual production skills. She was a filmmaker. And so the conversations came from there. She was also saying, I don't want to keep doing commission jobs for really big companies who can afford to pay me. I also want to tell those stories. So we basically said, why don't we set up a media channel together? And so the idea was that it's like a partnership between our two organizations, and me and her kind of lead it. And so that's how it started. And we launched it officially at the start of 2019. So I guess it's in fact in February again. So it's been exactly 2 years. There's so many loops. 2 years ago, we launched it, and we actually launched it in Holland. We were invited to go to a university to do some workshops in Holland, and we decided to use it as a chance to go and document some of the grassroots projects in Holland. So we started international, actually, and then we came back to London.
La idea, como puedes imaginarte, viene de televisar lo que no está siendo televisado. Las partes no televisadas de nuestra sociedad. Yo y mi cofundadora, Dios, suena muy oficial cuando dices cofundadora, pero sí, supongo que lo fundamos. Las dos tuvimos un viaje personal en el que venimos de un ambiente más formal y nos hemos ido más y más a lo informal. En mi caso, con el sector social, he trabajado como parte del gobierno para organizaciones sociales mucho más grandes, lo que considerarías ONGs, financiamientos, oficinas, todo eso. He trabajado para instituciones de investigación, etc. Fisayo ha trabajado en medios más mainstream, la BBC, el Canal 4, etc. Las dos llegamos a un punto de nuestra vida en el que sentíamos que estas instituciones no eran para nosotras. Comencé a hablarle mucho de esta idea de los proyectos grassroots no siendo lo suficientemente documentados, cuando yo estaba haciendo un show de radio y Fisayo se enfocaba más en producciones visuales como realizadora. Entonces ideamos un canal mediático juntas. Es un partnership entre ambas organizaciones y ambas lo dirigimos. Lo lanzamos a inicios de 2019, en febrero. En una universidad nos invitaron a dar talleres en Holanda y decidimos usarlo como oportunidad para ir y lanzar y además documentar algunas organizaciones grassroots de allá. Entonces empezamos internacional y luego ya regresamos a Londres.
Pro Tips.
Mona es consultora y, como pueden escuchar, tiene una experiencia enorme y ha dedicado su vida a trabajar por el activismo y la comunicación en el llamado tercer sector. Mona nos dio tips para colaborar con organizaciones pequeñas y hacer un cambio desde lo micro a lo macro.
We get asked this a lot, actually, and I get asked this a lot. And in some of the work I do at the moment in London is actually that I sometimes get to go as an advisor or a consultant to help other really small projects get going and started and get their structures together and so on. So what me and Fizeo almost always say to people actually is that there is a lot of work happening already, as I guess you would imagine that we feel with our channel, because we want to depict all of that work that people maybe haven't seen. And so I would really urge people to not always think you have to set up something yourself. And I know that I've set something up too, but after a long time and after maybe really feeling like where are the gaps? But actually for me, when I wanted to leave the more formal sector and go to the more grassroots, I really went and discovered and looked, and I went to events and I searched on Facebook and I met people. And I, for example, met Ian, who is the founder of May Project Gardens, and I started lending my help to him rather than maybe setting up something myself. I think we have to be really aware that it's a very saturated space and that there's already a lot of projects that are working and maybe don't have enough resources. So I would first of all say, really think about your reasons. Like, is it your own ego? Is it your own desire for entertainment? Or none of those things are bad, by the way. We all have those needs. But think about, do I immediately have to set something up, or can I find things that look good that might need help? So that would be my first tip. And maybe through the helping process, you eventually do end up figuring out what is needed and what could still be set up, or you maybe even get a very big role in the thing you helped. I mean, I'm now a co-director at May Project Gardens, but when I first met them, I just offered my help. I think the second tip is maybe to really, again, it's maybe similar, but to really recognize your own skills, your own capacity, your own ability, like really and truly, what can you give? It's completely fine to also want to give something that you still have to learn about. I don't think you have, if you educated yourself in one thing, it doesn't mean you have to do that for the rest of your life. But it is really good, I think, to be quite honest with yourself about your abilities, your skills. What resources do you have to give? Maybe actually you have a car and people really need a car to drive around or whatever. And just your capacity. I think a lot of people contact us, especially during COVID. A lot of people were like, I want to do something, or maybe I've lost my job, or maybe I've been furloughed, when you're signed off work and you're giving part of your salary, etc., to just sit at home. And a lot of people contact you, but then you say to them, okay, well, what do you want to do? Or and then they don't even know themselves, So you spend a lot of time as a small organization emailing them, calling them, and they maybe don't do that much for you in the end. So I would, again, be really clear with yourself about what you want to give, what time you have. Don't oversell, don't overcommit. It's probably better that you're conservative in your estimation and then you scale. And then I think it's something around really valuing, recognizing that there's a kind of micro and a macro level. We all want to change the whole world, and we all want to kind of, I don't know, maybe not all of us, but maybe some of us really want to completely transform the world, or maybe we want to see an end to neoliberalism or whatever it is that we feel is the trouble, but that's not going to happen straight away. So I think you have to have, again, an understanding of smaller day-to-day victories, what can be shifted in your local area, what campaign could you genuinely raise awareness of, rather than trying to do everything straight away. I mean, in our podcast series, there is an episode, which is me and Fizeo have an episode on each of us as people and what led us here. So that gives a bit more context. But again, I think in that episode as well, I speak about really recognizing the micro wins, because if you don't, I mean, even just for your own state of mind, if your goal is always everything has to change, you will be disillusioned every day.
A Un Televice lo encuentran como Untelevice-TV en Instagram y en Twitter. Chequen su podcast On Televice en Spotify, con un nuevo capítulo cada 2 semanas. Si tienen algún proyecto en México que creen que Mona y su equipo deben documentar, no duden en enviárselo a sus redes. En la producción de este podcast estuvieron Daniel Maldonado, Julio César Lanzagorta y Uriel Rodríguez. Tiene Onda es un podcast de Ibero.2, canal digital de Ibero 90.9. Yo soy Almond Hernández y si quieres saber más, sígueme en @oyealmond.
En los podcasts de Ibero.2 alteramos la realidad. Luciana León de la Barra y María Pérez intensean y argumentan para mostrarte cómo la tecnología y el diseño modifican las relaciones humanas en personas complejas, objetos simples. Escucha su primera temporada en plataformas de audio y en Ibero2.cloud. Ibero.2. Música para pensar.